Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I welcome you all here in this session at TNV Academy today. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce the speaker of the day, Mr. Srinivasan Sitharaman, who is going to talk to us about hazard identification and risk assessment in this webinar today. Mr. Sitharaman will discuss this topic in detail along with some real life examples he has experienced in the industry. Our distinguished speaker, Mr. Sitharaman, has done his post graduation in chemistry from Annamalai University, India. He is a lead auditor in ISO 9001, 14001, 45001, and 50001 standards. He has an industrial experience of around 30 plus years in field of manufacturing of non-ferrous alloys, lamp components, and primary and secondary batteries, and has worked in countries such as India, South Africa, and Sultanate of Oman. He has been imparting training to a number of organizations, entrepreneurs, and executives on various topics related to ISO standards and their certification and implementation. It was just a brief introduction of our guest speaker today. And now, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Mr. Srinivasan Sitharaman. I may request Mr. Sitharaman now to please start the session on hazard identification and risk assessment.
A very good evening to all of you present here in this webinar, and thank you again to TNV Academy for giving me another opportunity to host this topic. And this is interesting topic today. I see a lot of people have joined in this, so I think all of you are going to be benefited with the discussions. And at the end of this webinar, we will have a question and answer session. So any questions, you can put it in the chat box, and I will be looking at it, and then I will give you the answers at the end of the session. So today's topic is hazards identification and risk assessment. That is also called HIRA, and it is part of the ISO 45001 standard requirement. So we will go into details. What are we going to do about it? So before going into HIRA, I just want to give a brief introduction about ISO 45001. We have already covered in one of the earlier webinars how to implement this standard in the organization. So we just give a brief introduction before entering into the HIRA portion of it. ISO 45001 is an international standard for occupational health and safety management systems. So this is a standard released in 2018, and this is developed by Technical Committee 283, TC 283. So every standard has got a designated technical committee. They are responsible for developing the standard and revisions thereafter. So this TC 283 is only doing this ISO 45000 related development. So like that, every standard has got a separate technical committee. This has replaced the OSHA's 18000 standard, which was a British standard. Till 2018, this standard was available for the industry to practice occupational health and safety management system. ISO adopted the standard and also improved it with various new features like risk-based thinking and better responsibility and authority for management and things like that. And they've introduced this standard ISO 45001. Okay. ISO 45001 provides the framework. Like any other management system, this also provides a framework for improving the occupational health and safety performance through these things. One is elimination of hazards and minimizing risk. So look at all the hazards in an organization and then try to eliminate one by one, and then thereby reducing the risk to acceptable levels. Second is prevention of injury and ill health to employees of the organization, or for example, anybody in the organization at any point of time, because ISO 45000 considers all human beings within the working premises as workers. So for everybody, prevention of injury and ill health, both of them are important. And then involvement of workers. This is a very important hallmark of the standard, where worker involvement, worker participation through consultation is insisted in various clauses. So that's why this is also important. But today's webinar, we'll be looking at these two aspects of it. One is elimination of hazards and minimizing the risk, and also how to involve workers in this process. So we'll be looking at it in detail, these two aspects. Now, if you look at the structure of ISO 45001, this all follows the Plan, Do, Check Act. You'll see that 1, 2, 3 clauses are only for reference, introduction only. So the requirement for any management system standard starts from clause 4 and it ends at clause 10. So this is common for all the management system standards implemented from 2013 onwards. So ISO 45001 released in 2018 is also following the same approach, where you see a lot of time is spent in planning so that the execution goes smooth, and then checking mechanism whether we have done as per the plan. so that we can do course correction and act towards improvement. So this is a general structure. So all of them are very similar, except for a few changes you will see. One is actions to address risk and opportunities. Here we are going to talk about the hazards identification and risk assessment, which is what is the occupational health and safety risk for an organization. If you talk about QMS, it will be risk for customer dissatisfaction. If you go for environmental management system, it will be risk of polluting the environment. So like that, every management system has got a risk. Here we are going to talk about occupational health and safety risk for the workers in the organization. So that's what we have to take actions to address those risks and avail those opportunities. So again, another thing you see here, very specific to this ISO 45001 standard, is consultation and participation along with the leadership. So under the same class leadership, the consultation and participation of workers also insisted. So these two clauses are going to be discussed in detail today, how they are going to be implementing these requirements. Okay. So now hazards identification and risk assessment and opportunities assessment. As per the standard clause 6.1.2, what is the standard say? We have to understand that. Subclass 6.1.2.1, which says hazard identification, how to identify the hazards. For the organization shall means it's a for an organization to have a procedure and all the records associated with that, establish, implement and maintain a process or processes for hazard identification that is ongoing and proactive. See, when I say proactive, that means it is a risk-based thinking. So what can go wrong? Even before executing the job, we have to sit and think about what are all the activities involved and what are all the hazards associated with that, so that we can assess the risk and take mitigation measures. That's why it is called proactive measure, and that is very important in the risk-based thinking. The processes shall take into account how work is organized, social factors, leadership, and the culture of the organization. So the hazard identification risk assessment should understand how the work is organized, means the whole workflow. They need to understand each and every department. They need to know what are the workflows in their respective areas. Social factors, that means psychological factors, bullying, and also harassment by anybody, union leaders or somebody's experienced person harassing junior person, over workload for somebody. So all these factors will be considered. So differentiation, sexual harassment if lady workers are there. So everything has to be considered under the social factor. Leadership, what is leadership role? Are they really involved in improving the safety? Are they just delegating the responsibility and then they are washing their hands of that? So we need to understand how the leadership is available in the organization. How is their support for this HIRA process? And the culture of the organization, whether the culture is towards improving the safety, or basically they are not, old culture where they are not really involved in improving the safety, and then the situation is going down. So we have to consider everything in the process. Routine and non-routine activities also. Suppose certain things every day you will be doing, certain things once in a year you may be doing, where be having that much of proficiency in those activities. That's why when you say non-routine activity, the severity also has to be considered accordingly, because it's not a regular activity. People may have forgotten certain things, how it is done. So that's why it's routine or non-routine also has to be identified while doing the hazard identification risk assessment. And the situations, including past incidents, including emergencies. Suppose something has happened in the past, we need to definitely think about it. So we have to learn lessons. So we have to have the risk assessed from those emergency situations which happened in the past, and the reasons, the causes, including root causes. Also potential emergency situations. Because of their operations, if there is a potential emergency situation, like too much spillage resulting in explosion or fire happening in certain levels, these are all not a normal thing, but potential emergencies. Nothing has happened, but it could happen as a significant event. So we also have to consider that. And then actual or proposed changes in the organization, operations, processes, activities, and the occupational health and safety management system. Any change in the equipment, modification, process changes, or even organization change where new people are coming into certain areas. So all these things you have to consider, including occupational health and safety management system, what level the implementation is there. Based on that, the risk assessment also has to be done. If it is well established and everybody is understood, so naturally the risk awareness will be there for everyone. The risk will be coming down. So that's why the OHSMS also has to be considered in the HIRA process. In 6.1.2.2, assessment of OHS risk and other risks other to the management system, what we need to do, the organization shall establish, implement, and maintain a process to assess the OHS risk from identified hazards. In 6.1.2.1, you are identifying all the hazards. Now we are going to assess the risk under this class while taking into account the effectiveness of the existing controls. When you assess the risk, you have to please include the existing current controls available. We should not think that it's a raw risk and no controls available. Always there will be some controls in the organization. We need to consider them, like having a safety shoe, having overalls, having goggles given for working in acid area, or having overalls given to the employees. Working at height, people are being given these sling belts. So these are all the current controls. We have to look at the effectiveness of the existing controls while assessing the risk. So this is the standard viewpoint. So I have presented here. Now we'll go about seeing how we have to look at this hazard identification. So what is a hazard? We need to understand that first. Hazard is anything that has a potential to cause harm. Means, as I gave earlier example, a banana peel lying there on the road, it has got a potential to have a slip and fall hazard if somebody comes and steps on it. So that is a potential. Nothing has happened. It's only a peel lying on the road, but it has got the potential to make someone injury. So that's why it is a potential. Same way you can have a live wire which is there. So it's an electrical hazard. If somebody touches it, he is going to get electrocuted. So like that, working at height, so there is a potential person can fall down and get injured. So like that, when you are going in a vehicle, there is a potential that you may get injured in an accident. So all these are potential, but it is not realized. So, but it's a hazard, we need to be aware of it. Okay. So now it takes a hazard and someone exposed to the hazard to produce an incident. In ISO 45001, nowhere we are seeing a word called accident, because some incidents are accidents where persons are getting injured, but all accidents are incidents. So we have to focus on the incidents where we can avoid these kind of incidents in future. So that's why a hazard and somebody has to get exposed to the hazard to produce an incident. Okay. So now we will see hazard exposure, you will result in incident. If somebody is injured in this, then it is going to be a kind of accident. Otherwise, it is only a property damage or just a near miss or nothing has happened. Anything could be, but we still have to record it as a incident and investigate that why it happened, so we can avoid an accident later. Okay. Engineering controls focus on the hazard. For example, if there is a noisy machine generating a lot of noise, people are not able to work in that area. So you have got a noise enclosure. So that is a kind of engineering control. It only focuses on the hazard. Same way there is a guarding for a machine. So again, it is only an engineering control. It focuses on the hazard so that nobody puts the finger because it is covered. So nobody will get injured. So another thing is management control, like putting a notice board saying that in a hazardous area or hazardous chemical storage or a noisy area, do not enter this without earplugs. These are all management controls or administrative controls, you can say. So that focus on the exposure. People should not be exposed to the noise. People should not be exposed to the radiation. So like that, they put a symbols outside. A simple thing would be a wet floor. That is also a kind of administrative control. So people will walk carefully if there is a signage saying wet floor during the cleaning process. So these both are aimed at reducing the risk to the people. Both engineering control and management control, our focus is to reduce the risk of injury or ill health to employees. So this is general about the hazard. Now, there are various types of hazards. We need to understand, so that when we do the assessment, we need to know what is the hazard we are assessing, and then we can rate them accordingly. So these are almost 95% of the hazards which are available in the industry are coming under these things. Gravity, anything you are working at height, so anything which goes up has to come down. So it is going to be a fall injury or falling objects from the top. So that's why you are always required to wear helmet when you are going under structures, because anything can happen. Something may fall and cause a head injury. So that is a gravity related hazard. Motion, moving vehicles, moving objects, there is going to be a and there is going to be a hazard with that. Mechanical hazard, move machinery, wherever you are working in machinery, there's a pinch points, crush points, and then there is also a lot of sharp edges. So these are all mechanical hazard related. Electrical hazard, everybody understands, anything above 40 volts is going to be very serious, and electrocution and even death is also possible, fatality. Biological hazard, contaminated food or bacterial contamination, or even your blood transfusion, if there is any wastage is not properly controlled, there also can be a biological hazard. Transmission of diseases, the biggest one being the COVID-19, we all have been enduring in the last 2 years, so that's a biological hazard. Pressure, any gases under pressure is cylinder walls, if they are not proper, that can result in a kind of sudden release of gases under pressure. Even compressed air, which every industry is using, so that is also under pressure. We have to be very careful. People used to clean their uniform at the end of the day. That is a very wrong practice, because a lot of particles coming through the air, compressed air at that pressure, can damage the eyes, and it will be a very serious injury. So pressure. Temperature, hot surfaces, ovens and furnaces and all, very dangerous if it can cause burn injuries to people. Pressure and temperature, there is a combination which is a steam, which can be pressure as well as temperature. That will be scalding for the skin. So injury will be very, very severe for that. And chemical, there are so many chemicals handled in the industry. There are material safety data sheets available. So each and every chemical has got a different kind of hazard. There are various ways chemicals can enter the body. 3 things. One is absorption, inhalation, and ingestion. Ingestion is through the mouth. Inhalation is through the nose into the lungs, and then it will go into the bloodstream. And absorption is through the skin, the pores in the skin. So these 3 ways the chemicals can enter. So we have to take all the precautions, like washing your hands, eating food, wearing the protective equipment like gloves and mask while handling the chemical. So these are all the hazards we need to know. Radiation, alpha, beta, gamma radiation can cause tissue damage and cancer also on a prolonged exposure. So that is also a radiation hazard used in X-ray and other investigation sources. This is there. Sound, acceptable sound is music, unacceptable sound is noise, and that is a noise pollution. So these are all various types of hazards you are generally aware of. Now, how can we recognize these hazards? Very important. We know hazards are there, but how do we recognize? Suppose you are working in an organization for so many years, you get used to the things, you may not even be able to appreciate what all types of hazards are there, because you are part of the furniture. So when a new person is coming into the lab, he can smell a lot of acids and other things, whereas people working in the area are used to it, so they may not be able to see. That's why we have to train ourselves to recognize hazard, then only we can assess the risk coming out of it. So God has given the 5 senses. It makes sense to use our senses like sight, hearing, touch, smell, taste. Of all this, which one we should be using the most? As you all know, sight is the best one, because you are at a distance looking at the hazard, so you won't be impacted. And taste should be the least one. So you don't want to touch the cyanide and taste it to say it is whatever taste it is. Before that, you would be gone. So taste should be the least one, and sight should be the most frequently used hazard identification mechanism. Hearing, suppose some people who are visually challenged, they can have a stronger sense in terms of hearing and touch, so they can also identify some vibrations and some high noise we can find out from there. Touch is also vibrating surfaces and also hot surfaces you can find easily. Smell, again, gases, certain gases got a characteristic smell, like H2S means this rotten egg smell, and LPG leakage. Everybody understands the mercaptans added to the LPG, so that as soon as there is leakage, people can immediately recognize the smell, so that people can be aware of the hazard in those areas. Taste, certain spoiled food, you just taste 1 spoon, immediately this food is not good for consumption. Same way, certain things this is not good for human consumption, so taste wise. But that should be the least way. First and foremost should be the sight based identification is the best. But apart from these 5 senses, there are certain things where we cannot use these senses to identify. For example, a live wire, you cannot identify. It's only a wire. Only when you touch it, it is having a live wire, and you will be electrocuted. So you don't want to be the tester. Use a proper tester whenever there is a live wire which is exposed. You don't know whether it is live or not. Use a tester to do it. Do not become a tester. It can be very detrimental to you. Okay, then carbon monoxide. That's another gas which is odorless, colorless. So it can be killing you silently without you knowing about it. So that's why a lot of people see within the closed car, people die because of asphyxiation, because they inhale this carbon monoxide in those closed environments, because there is less oxygen, and people end up dying without even knowing that they are dying. So these are the things we have to be aware of. So we need to have detectors for that, so that they can find the level of carbon monoxide before entering enclosed spaces and things like that. Okay, this is it. Now I'm giving a picture to all the webinar attendees in the webinar. Just look at this picture, because now we have to use our eyes to identify the hazard. So this is to train to see the hazard. So I'll give you a 2 minutes time. You just make a note of what all hazards are there, and you can maybe put it in the chat box, or you can make a list, and I'm going to show you the list. You can verify whether you're done or not. Minimum there is 25 to 30 hazards you can identify here. So that shows the more and more hazards you identify, you are training yourself to look for hazards. You have to look for it. It will not present itself. You have to see what all activities going on this area, which looks normal because no injury, nothing has happened, but all are potential. It is waiting to happen. So we have to identify them so that we can correct the situation to avoid any accidents in this area. So I think the time is enough. Maybe you have noted certain things. You can put it in the chat box. Yeah, I see things are coming in. A lot of people are responding.
I have noticed. Sir, I have noticed one.
Yes, good.
The glass.
So some obvious ones are there.
The glass of the window is broken.
Very nice, very well pointed. That through that rainwater can come, and also there is a live wire at the bottom. It can get short circuit there because of that, and also sharp edges of the glass. Very well pointed. Okay, now let's reveal the type of hazards. I just put 15 or so, but I'm sure you're finding much more than that. Obvious ones and very concealed ones. So now from this picture, you can see person standing on forklift. So forklift is meant for lifting people. It's not meant for lifting people. It's only for lifting stuff. Somebody is standing on it for gaining the height, which is a very wrong practice. Pallet trucks moving across marked line. When there is a demarcated area with a zebra crossing, you should not cross it where they're merrily crossing that, and it can also cause accidents. Broken window with sharp glass edges. One of the participants mentioned it. Very well pointed out. And exposure to electrical points to rain from outside. That's a risk from there. And then ladder on pallet. Pallet is not a proper surface where you can put a ladder, because it's going to be shaky because there are gaps in the pallet. Okay. Then person jumping off the barricade onto someone. So that is also, you've got a barricade, you have to come out with the proper way. You can't jump onto that, when you do some maintenance, leaving the job halfway through. Person stretching his legs too far in the rack when he is trying to lift something, it is actually going to damage his hip. Then excess weight on the rack. You can see the rack sagging because of that excess weight. So it's not properly done. It can fall anytime, anybody can be injured. Forklift visibility while moving, blocked by pallet track. So the whole pallet stack is too high that the forklift driver cannot even see what is ahead of him. So it is going to have a collision easily. Then pallet configuration is not right because it doesn't have interlock. It is going to fall off anytime because the pallets have to have interlock box packaging. Okay. Then person carrying boxes more than his height, so he is also obstructing his visibility, so he can bump into somebody and then cause injury there. Okay. Oil spill on the floor, it's waiting to happen. Somebody is going to slip on it. Person walking on the shop floor while talking on the phone. He's just near the oil spill. Anytime he's going to slip and fall. You should not be using cell phones when you are on the shop floor, and your talking and walking is totally prohibited. Too much rubbish kept on the exit doorway. In case of emergency exit, the whole thing is blocked with this, so people are going to panic and stampede is going to happen. So this is all we need to understand, etc. I'm sure you have found much more than that. I see a lot of responses in the chat box also. Very good. So this is what we are trying. We are trying to train our eyes to look for the hazard. So then we can do the risk assessment accordingly. Generally, in any industrial situation, that was one situation I gave, but potential hazards in the workplace will be common, like these are the things we can see, items falling from height. That's why when we go into structures, we need to wear helmets so that we are protected from that. Cut injury to sharp edges. At home, we know this coconut scraper. Most of the time, we end up having injury when we are doing that. Or, we're cutting with the vegetables. Lady's finger, when you cut, you also sometimes cut your finger. So these are all very careful. Sharps are always dangerous. In the industrial scenario, also same way. Contact with moving parts, entanglement with the jigs and glouses. Some grinding wheels where you are not supposed to wear glouses. When you are doing this grinding, suppose the gloves gets into it and then the whole hand and finger also can get into the machine. Very dangerous. Eye injuries due to flying chips. where the swarfs, when you're doing turning and all in the lathe, you see this metal chips flying off very fast. If you are not wearing the proper goggles and protection, it can also damage your eyes very easily. Exposure to excessive noise, DGs and other things, if it is not having a proper enclosure, it can be damaging to the ear. Hearing impairment will be there. Exposure, inhalation of fumes, vapor, emissions and dust is going to cause lung injury, lung diseases also in future. Skin allergy due to some chemical exposure like acetone and all people use for cleaning hands, and over a period of time it is going to dry your skin and cause some irritation and allergic reactions. Slippage and fall due to spillage of oil, one of the situation we saw in the picture. Sealants and cleaning agents. Fire hazard in any factory, wherever paper and other things are there, a short circuit can trigger a fire. So fire hazard is very common. Everywhere we need to have a required fire extinguishers and drills conducted to take care of that. Trip and fall from heights, that's also one of them. Electrocution, you can understand static electricity and electrocution, both of them. Sometimes, in going to shopping malls, you touch that trolley, you get a shock. That is a static electricity. Sometimes it can be very severe also. Exposure to X-ray, laser rays and radiation, these are all radiation related. Immediately you may not know the problem, but acute will not be there, but chronic will be there. Over a period of time, if you are exposed to the radiation, you may have tissue damage and even cancerous possibilities also there, blood cancer and things, leukemia, everything, because of radiation over a prolonged time. You will see it in the nuclear power stations where people are working. At a later part of life, if they have not done a proper analysis, they will see a lot of radiation received and cause problems later. Lifting of weights, overloading of ropes, it also have ergonomical hazard with the improper lifting of weights, and overloading of ropes can also snap and it can cause major injury to people. Inadequate illumination, if the whole area is not lit properly, you are not able to see things, you are going to make a lot of mistakes, and also it's a hazard in the workplace. So we have to have a proper lumen output for all work areas. There is a designated spec, we need to follow that and ensure the illumination is right. Okay, so now factors that increase risk. Now we have seen the hazard, potential hazards. Now how the risk will get multiplied because of the hazards, what all other factors can increase the risk from those hazards. One is number of employees exposed. If there is only one person working in an area and the hazard is there, he knows about it, it will be very quiet. Nothing will happen. The hazard will always be there, nothing will happen. But more and more people are coming into the area, there is too much of commotion, there is going to be a problem. Too many cooks spoil the food, like that. In a blind man's house, everything is properly arranged. He knows exactly how many steps to whatever items he has got it properly arranged. The moment somebody else comes, the visible person, he is going to disturb everything and make a chaos. Same way, more people means the risk is also going to multiply in that area. Frequency and duration of exposure. You work there only for 5 minutes taking sample, but somebody is working 8 hours in the area, so naturally the risk for that person is going to be higher because he is exposed for a longer duration. Okay, the proximity of employees to the point of danger. Suppose some explosion happens, the immediate vicinity people die, but then the far away people may get some, shrapnels coming in and some damage limbs and things like that. And even far away, a small minor first aid cases. So that's why the closer to the point of danger, the more risk it is for the injury. Okay, the potential severity of the injury or illness, it also will determine the risk coming out of it. Working at elevation, the more the height, the more the damage you are going to get. Falling from 6 feet and above is considered very serious. So anybody working at above 6 feet has to have a proper protection to avoid this fall happening. Okay, unreasonable workload. I'm talking psychological factors, or even too much weight lifting in the area, or one person is loaded, other person is sitting simply. So that also going to put a lot of pressure on the person working. So these are all unreasonable workload, along with the bullying and other harassment in the workplace is also going to add the risk of person getting injured. Working under stress, hurry, fatigue, like when end of shift, end of week, people want to rush and go off, because they may also do things in a very hurry manner. They may also make accidents. Fatigue, illness, personal problems. You bring personal problem from home, you are also going to cause accidents in the office. These are all psychological factors. We need to consider them. Suppose if we see somebody is not doing well, mentally, we have to give the counseling and all, because of him, many other people also will get injured in the process. So we have to make very careful. Like pilots and all, before boarding the flights, they go through the psychological assessment, then only they are cleared for taking the flight. So like that, we need to put some critical jobs. The persons have to be psychologically evaluated before taking up the job. Any form of distraction that takes focus away from job, too much noise and you are not able to focus, you are going to commit mistakes. So that's also adding to the risk. Lack of effective supervisor or employee accountability or enforcement. Supervisor is not there, people do one thing, like we wear helmet after seeing the police, traffic police, so that is not going to improve. So if you wear it for your own safety, then only it's going to reduce the risk. If you use it for traffic police, you are not saving yourself. The risk is very high. So you should not be waiting for supervision, you should do it on your own. Be selfish or safety. Lack of proper training of managers, supervisors, employees. If you do not have a proper trained person working on a machine, he is also going to make a lot of mistakes and also cause injury and illness to others along with him. So that's the risk of improper training people working in those areas. Improper, inadequate workplace design. So workplace is not ergonomically designed. You may get a backache after sitting there for some time. You have inaccessible areas in the machinery, so you are going to sprain your back because of working in those areas. So these all need to be considered to avoid the risk of injury to people. Last but not the least, lack of management commitment towards safety. Management should be committed, because the ISO 45001, all responsibilities laid with the management. So if the management is not doing his part right, there is going to be a very poor safety situation in the organization. That's why it is very important, the support in terms of allocation of resources, whatever PPE required, they have to provide the PPEs, and you can't use the same PPE again and again. If it is worn out, it has to be timely replaced. All these things management has to involve itself. Okay. So now hazard and risk control. Now it's very important thing we are going to look at it. So now we are seeing the process. How are we going to do the HIRA? First, if you want to do any activity, first look at what all things are involved in that activity. You have to break it down into small tasks which you are doing, like going and taking a sample, for example. So you need to go up to a certain elevation. You have to face a lot of risk or hazards on the way. So you need to list down what all things you will do on a daily basis. And then that is called inventory of tasks. For making one job, there may be 10 tasks involved in it. So task is a small part of a job. So you understand like that. So everyday job, there will be so many tasks will be there. So we have to inventorize them. So that this should be done with the workers' participation. In every area, there will be a lot of workers. You involve everybody so that we can also evidence participation of workers in the process, and they will be able to give a lot of inputs. Okay, so first inventorize the task. Then look at identifying the hazard in each and every task. Suppose you say one particular activity has got certain hazard exposure to the hazard, you need to make a point of it that this is one hazard. Like working in an area, there are noise, so you need to say noise hazard related. Or some electricity equipments are there, so you also need to put electrical hazard. So for one job, there may be 2-3 hazards involved. So that's why you inventorize the task, then you look at the hazard, it will be multiplying. One task may have 3 hazards, so you will have 30 hazards from 10 tasks. So identify the hazard and then look at the consequences. Suppose somebody is exposed to this hazard, what can happen? The raw consequence. Suppose somebody is touching the electrical wire, the consequence is fatality or electrocution. So that is the consequence. So we need to know for every hazard what is the consequence. So suppose the vehicles are colliding, the consequence is injury or fatality. Anything can be there. If it is a major accident, then it can be a fatality. If it is a minor accident, it can be an injury, broken bones, like that. So you'll have to identify both of them separately. Under what condition? Emergency condition, it can be a fatality. Under normal condition, maybe it's a minor injury. So like that, we have to segregate so that our rating becomes very meticulous, so that we can identify and reduce the risk accordingly. So determine the consequences. And now the important part is looking at the existing control plan. That means for every activity, you may have some control plan. Like, you are going into that area, you need to wear safety shoes, you need to wear overalls, coats, and specs for you. So these are all the things we need to know what is currently available. So this will reduce the risk significantly. For example, you want to get into a car, you need to check whether it has got the seat belt properly, airbags are there, the braking mechanism is working. These are all the existing controls. You need to use them. Like seat belt is there, but if you do not wear, it is not going to give you protection. So same way we need to use those PPEs. So that is why existing control plan, what is there? So now you filter the hazard and risk through the existing control plan. Now you are evaluating the risk. If you do not have the control plan, the risk is going to be straight away coming to you. But there is a control plan available in every organization because people want to work safely, because their own safety is important, so they will be taking some precaution in that. So these are the control plan available. So now you evaluate the risk and say whether it is low or high. If it is low, like I said, the example of going in a scooter, you wear the helmet, you got a driving license, you know how to go on the road, always follow the traffic rules. These are the existing controls. So now you feel that I can go in a scooter safely, and you can take up that risk. So that is low risk. It is acceptable. So you can carry on doing that work by evaluating the risk and putting the control plan currently what is available. You are taking the risk which is acceptable or tolerable. You carry on. Suppose the risk is still high in your rating. So then what you should do? You should be reviewing the control plan. The current control plan is not adequate. That's why it has become high risk. So we have to review the control plan. So what you do? You review the control plan and then evaluate the risk. So this process has to go on again. So like that you go on doing it again and again till the control plan which is reviewed, by putting additional controls, you are making it acceptable risk. So till that time, this risk assessment has to be going on. So you should not be living with any significant risk. You have to put additional controls in the review, the control plan mechanism, and then bring the risk down to acceptable risk. So this is very important. This is the essence of the HIRA. Here main thing is worker participation and identifying the hazards and inventorizing the task. If you do not list down all the activities, you will not be able to know the hazards. Okay, so that is very important. Now we are going to rate the hazard, because HIRA is all about quantitative rating, so we can prioritize where we need to focus. The risk is a function of three things: severity, exposure, and probability. Okay, so now what is severity? I am giving a rating minimum 1 to maximum 5. For example, a small cut injury can be a first aid case. It can be given rating of 1. Somebody is dead, fatality, can give 5. So nothing, all can be in between that. So if you have 1, fatality is 5, nothing can be more than 5. Understand? So that's how we do it. How serious will the injury or illness be as a result of an accident or exposure? So if it is a first aid case, you give 1. If it is going to be fatality, you give 5. Okay. It can be insignificant, minor, injury, major, serious, fatal. So this way you can segregate and give the rating. You can't give rating 0 because everything will become 0. Risk can never be 0. Okay, so severity you understood. That nature of the injury, what can happen to the person and how serious it can be. Now exposure. Give minimum 1 and maximum 5. Exposure means I am going there only for taking sample in that particular area. So I am exposed to that hazard only for 2 minutes or 3 minutes in a day. But some maintenance person is working in the area for 8 hours, fixing some problem. So for him, the exposure will be much more higher. A noisy area, for example, I am exposed only as a sampler for 2 minutes, whereas a person in maintenance or person working in the operation area is for 8 hours. So for him, it will be 5. For me, it will be 1. So that is what, how long the person is exposed to the activity. It can be radiation also, same way. You know, in radioactive power stations, nuclear power stations, when they carry out maintenance line of people, they send one person only for 5 minutes, because that much radiation only he can receive. So he will just go open the bolt and come out. So the other person will go and open the enclosure and do the repair and come out. So like that, there will be 10 people doing one small activity. It is well planned, because they want to reduce the exposure of radiation to one person. They distribute to the entire maintenance team, so that everybody gets a uniform dose, so it's not going to affect them significantly. Same way, noise level, gas inhalation, everything after a certain point of time, the exposure can be fatal. So that's what we need to understand. Here also rating could be low, very low, medium, high, very high. But rating is 1 to 5. Now, the probability. Some accidents have never happened in our organization, so you give 1. If it is happening very frequently, you give 5. So that is just the probability or occurrence. How likely a worker will be injured or become ill as a result of an accident or exposure. So every day some incident are happening in the work area, you give a rating of 5 for that. but it has never happened, you give 1. So in between you can allocate, once in a while if it happens, you can give between these ratings. Okay, so the purpose is unlikely, likely, very likely, like that you identify and give a rating. So now we have got severity, exposure, and probability. Now we multiply these 3. So what we'll get? We'll get 1 into 1 into 1 is 1. That is a minimum rating. Maximum can be 125. So now we know when we get a number, I will be able to focus more, which is going to be attacked first to reduce the risk. So we need to prioritize. For that, this risk assessment is important. Now I have a HIRA register. I'm giving a sample for you just to show how a register will look like. So you can have a similar register or you can have your own register. Just to have, a document number, very important because it's a very important document in the ISO 45001 standard. And then HIRA number, different departments will have, so you can give a number for the company name, logo, and also give the title, HIRA register for that. So now main important thing is the team members, very important, that who are all going to be involved in this. This is going to show worker participation. Include names of workers in your department to evidence consultation participation. As per 5.4 clause, this is very important. So you can show that all members working in the area are involved, and also involve contract employees so that you don't leave them out. They are also part of the process, so they can come up with a lot of ideas, suggestions to improve the situation. So we should not neglect them. So that is very important. That's first thing. Second, description of the job, task, operation, like what type of activity we are going to assess the HIRA for. It may have various small activities involved. So we have to mention that job. It is like, maintaining a particular machine. That can be one of the job, but then it will involve all activities which we have to identify now. So now, after putting the job, we have to go for activities, sub-activities. So main activity and sub-activity, all we have to mention one by one so that we can rate them accordingly. So now, activity type, routine or non-routine. I already mentioned in the webinar that routine activities, you will be more careful because you are trained to do that on a daily basis. Non-routine activity means we have to be a little bit cautious. The severity can also be more because people are not trained or regularly doing that job. So that is non-routine activity. We have to mention routine or non-routine. Then hazard category. Like I gave already a list of hazards. So under what category this hazard is coming in? So we already put in like these the hazards: gravity, motion, mechanical, electrical, all these type of hazard. You just mention, you can have a drop down menu and then select the right kind of hazard. Okay, so that you understood. Then hazard description. Now you only give a hazard category. Now hazard description, you have to describe what type of incident it's going to happen, exposure to the person with the hazard, so that we have to mention it in a kind of sentence, like exposure to a particular thing. You have to say here, you may say physical hazard, but then falling from height. So like that you mention that is the hazard description. So once you write that, then you are going to look at the consequence. Consequences: person at risk or possible health injury, ill health. That means falling from height is going to be a head injury or maybe broken bones. You just have to put some kind of body injury so that you have identified the consequence of that. Now we have to see it's a normal thing or abnormal thing or potential. So is happening as a normal way or abnormal manner or potential emergency. Based on that, the rating also will be changing. So we need to identify that. Is it a normally it happens, or abnormal means certain cases, some new person is coming, then only it will happen. Normal means it is every time happening, but the risk is not very severe. But potential emergency cases, the severity is going to be high. So that's why we have to indicate that, because these are all standard requirements. Then come the important part, existing control measures. Currently, what all the controls available in the department to avoid this risk from coming to the person. So that is why the existing control measures have to be identified, like PPE or standard operating procedure, training given to the employees, or there is a work instruction available. All these things will be addressed there. Okay. So then you do the rating, that is severity, exposure, and probability. You put rating 1 to 5, 1 to 5, and then you multiply these three and come up with the risk priority number. That is called RPM. So that is very common in the FMEA scenario. So we are using the same here for risk assessment. So risk priority number will be a multiplication of these three. So once you got the number, now we know whether it is acceptable or not. You need to have a rating yourself, evaluation criteria. Based on that, you can decide. If it is not acceptable, then we have to put additional control measures. Additional control measures you have to put, then again rate them to bring it down on the risk. So that is very important. Existing control measures, if they are not adequate, you see the cycle has to go on till we get acceptable risk. So that's why additional control measures have to be put to reduce the exposure or probability. Severity cannot be reduced because the event is still be there. Only exposure can be reduced by putting an enclosure, or probability can be reduced by giving better training or better PPEs, so that those things will reduce. So the risk also, the overall rating will come down. So that is very important. Now, whatever you do, you refer the document here in the HIRA register itself, whether you have got a standard operating procedure or work instruction procedure, operation control procedure, all these things, even management program. There is an occupational health and safety management program to reduce the noise in a particular area. So it will be a project. So you mention the reference to the project. Till that time, people can use the earplugs and manage. But once you put the acoustic enclosure, then the risk is going to significantly reduce. So this is a HIRA register, very important document in the ISO 45001. Now, there is risk category, RPN, and what is the category? For evaluation purpose, I am showing it here. This 125, I saw 1 to 125. I say below 7, if the number is coming, then it's a very low risk, acceptable. Nothing will happen. We can carry on with our business like any day. Nothing is going to happen to anybody because this is acceptable risk. Okay, 7 to 15, low risk, tolerable. We can tolerate it. We just have to monitor and keep it under check. It should not escalate. So we just monitor them, but we can continue to work in the area. 16 to 40 is medium risk, but significant. So we need to think about it. So now how to look at this risk with the time-bound action? We have to bring down the risk to less than 15. This is all I'm talking about. RPN number, severity, exposure, probability ratings. So medium risk onwards, we have to be alarmed. 41 to 79, high risk, unacceptable. Definitely, we cannot live with that. We need to stop the operation and do something about it. If the assessment says 80 to 125, that's a maximum. It's very high risk, catastrophic for the organization. Not only people are going to die or injured, there's going to be a property damage and reputation of the company will be at risk. So we have to immediately stop everything and then look at this. So now you see these three things, categories, where additional control measures to be taken for these risk categories, so that the risk rating becomes less than 16. That is, up to 15 is acceptable. These three are not acceptable. Only the medium risk we can continue to work, but we need to put in additional control measures to bring down the risk. Okay, this is just for evaluation of the criteria. Also, risk can never be zero. So to demonstrate, I have got this video, small clip here. You can see two people are walking, and suddenly somewhere there is a tire coming from some vehicle. It hit the person at the back and he is spot dead because it hit at the back. So you need to be aware of it. You can see if you are not seen properly. Here the tire is coming from somewhere and he's on a service road and it hit him so bad that it's instant death for him. So risk can never be zero. So that's why I'm saying acceptable risk. I'm not saying zero risk. We have to consider that. Now, implementation and maintenance of HIRA. How do we implement and maintain? Communicate the significant hazards to all the employees. Once you have done the rating, you have identified these are the significant hazards. So all people working in the area should be communicated. Okay, that is first thing, so that they are aware of the hazard in that area. Then follow applicable operation control work instructions. So we have to follow the operation control, whatever work instructions given for the particular we have to follow them religiously. Then monitor and review progress on management program. Suppose if you say management program has been taken up for reducing the risk, like a noise enclosure or changing the machine or having some firefighting systems installed to improve the safety situation. So all that is management program. We have to monitor and review them in a management review meeting on a regular basis. Then review HIRA once a year. This document is not a once-off document. It is always a live document. We have to review them, the HIRA, once a year at least, minimum. Okay. Other triggers for review. When all we can review this, apart from this 1 year, incidents occurring in the area. Suppose in spite of all this HIRA, there is some incident occurred. That means we have to look at the HIRA, whether this particular hazard is identified, the risk is identified or not. If not, we have to put it in the register and rate them. If it is already identified, then what you have to do, you have to increase the rating on occurrence because it has occurred now. So the probability is increased. So we have to increase the rating and make it significant so that we can put in some additional controls to bring down the risk. So that is one thing. Second, new equipment modification process. Suppose you change the equipment, replaced and put a new one, or a process modification is done. So naturally the HIRA has to be done because now your line of activities have changed. So we have to also review the HIRA and revise it. Also, after implementation of corrective action, once there is a non-conformance incident happened, investigated and found the root cause, you have done the corrective action. Now again you have to review the HIRA to include any risk which was left out in the investigation process we identified. We need to include that. And then change in applicable legal requirements. Suppose there is a legal requirement which says that the limit on this particular gas has to be reduced from current level to another 10%. So naturally you need to look at the risk from that point of view, and then we have to rating also will increase because the legal requirement is there. So we have to make it significant. So these are all the various trigger mechanisms. Okay, with this I conclude my webinar on the HIRA, that is hazard identification and risk assessment and risk control. These two things go together, and worker participation is very important in this. Thank you.
I request the participants to please carry on with the questions if they have any.
Sir, I have a question.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
What is the difference between job safety analysis and HIRA?
See, HIRA is activity based. Every activity we list down the inventory of tasks. We do each and everything. We do the quantitative rating. Whereas job safety analysis is a overall job. That job may have maybe 15 to 20 tasks or 20 activities. So job hazard, where we only do a qualitative rating. Suppose it's not a normal thing. All normal regular activities we have a HIRA already established. But suddenly some new job has come, something as contractor has come at work, he has to do some shifting or something has to be done. That is treated as a specific job. For that, we have to do a specific job safety analysis where we will look at what all hazards are involved. Again, the same process only, but here we will be putting all the precautions in place before we start the job. So job safety analysis is not in the HIRA. HIRA is doing quantitative assessment, job safety analysis qualitative assessment, and it has got more than many tasks involved in a job safety analysis. So we do a proper analysis and take all the precautions before we start the job. HIRA is your regular activities, quantitative rating done, and then we have put in measures in place. So that's what's followed. Hope it clears your doubt.
Yes, sir, of course. And I have one more question. What is acceptable risk? What do you mean?
See, acceptable risk, basically, if you do the risk assessment, you will see that, whatever rating we discussed, every organization can have their own rating. So acceptable risk is you can carry on with our work on a day-to-day basis without worrying about any injury or ill health. That is called acceptable risk. Like going in a car, taking care of the traffic rules and regulations, having a driver who is experienced, and also having defensive driving, and using the seat belts and all other safety precautions when you take, then you are accepting the risk of traveling in the car. So that is called acceptable risk. It doesn't guarantee that you will be alive. Somebody can come and hit from you from the behind, and you may also get involved in a collision, and you can also have consequences accordingly. But at least from your point of view, you have done all the precautions and you have considered the risk as acceptable to travel in the car. So that is called acceptable risk, to mitigate whatever risk obvious to you to acceptable level.
Hello.
Yes.
Sir, I have a question.
Yeah, tell me.
Can we continue the activity if it is a significant hazard?
You see, in the rating, I have given 5 categories. One is a low level risk, then other one is acceptable risk, and then the significant risk coming. So the significant point is where we need to be careful. Definitely, we need not be working in the not unacceptable category as well as catastrophic category. So the significant category, we need to take a decision as a management. Certain critical activities may need to be continued, but there is a significant risk involved. So our precautions to be much more in a significant risk. Ideally, we should not be taking up the job till the risk is coming to acceptable level. But certain deadlines are there. We need to complete the task, so that in those cases, safety department and the person concerned can have a dialogue and then come to a conclusion that what should be done. So the significant risk should be attended immediately if possible. Otherwise, with a time-bound plan, we should attempt it, so that it comes to acceptable risk. But the critical ones and the catastrophic ones, we should stop the operation immediately. So that is like, orange light, I would say. Like green, we know we can go in the traffic. Red means we stop. But orange is cautious. So I would put this significant risk under the orange category. So we have to be watchful, so that we know how many significant hazards are there, which we need to look at it and then control the risk from them.
Hello.
Yes, ma'am.
Sir, I have a question.
Yeah.
Sir, how to involve shop floor workers in HIRA?
As I mentioned, this is one of the important requirements of the standard ISO 45001, consultation and participation. So the head of the department, when they are doing the HIRA, we have to invite all the people who are working in the area as a kind of, a kickstart meeting when we start first, when we do that, so that everybody mandatorily present in the discussion. It's not to be done in the office sitting with a couple of people and then we finish it for the sake of documentation. It should be basically involving the people. So they are the people day in, day out working in that area. So they know they have faced in the history, what all kind of hazards they have come across. So they will be able to list all the hazards or list all the activities they do in that area, so that the hazard identification process is complete. Without them, if you do, it is incomplete and it's a shoddy process, which is not going to help the organization. So how to involve them is, again, leadership involvement is there. If the department head feels everybody should be involved, so he can make it happen. So he has to support the whole process. If he is not involved, then it is all. That's why I said management support, supervisor support is very important for the HIRA to be effective. So it is in the hands of the management or the person in the department, head of the department.
Hello. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Any more questions?
Yes, sir. I have a question.
Yeah. Go ahead, ma'am.
Can one activity have different risk ratings?
Yes, I said, under normal condition, abnormal condition, and potential emergency conditions, it will have a different ratings. Also, one activity may have 2-3 hazards involved in that. So when you are working on a motor, for example, when you are testing it, some electrical hazard will be there. When you are also mechanical movement, there can be a mechanical hazard in that. So like that, many hazards, and also under what condition, normal, abnormal, and potential emergency cases, the rating will be different. So it will have more than one rating. So accordingly, your controls also kept for those abnormal or potential emergency conditions by doing some potential emergency drills, so that we are prepared for a kind of eventuality.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Welcome.
Do any of the participants has any more questions?
No, sir.
I guess there are no more questions now, so we can now conclude the particular session. I would start conclusion of this particular webinar by extending my heartfelt gratitude and thanks to Mr. Sitharaman sir for giving his valuable time and the way you have shared your knowledge and wisdom in this particular webinar, and you have explained the complete topic, which was a very important one, shows your absolute expertise on the topic. I hope that all the participants has been benefited by your knowledge and wisdom which you have shared today. I hope to see you again soon with an exciting new topic in few weeks. And I also thank all the participants for being an active part of this webinar and putting across your questions. I hope the questions were very well answered by Sitharaman sir. I look forward seeing all of you again soon. Wish you all a best of luck on behalf of TNV Academy for all your future endeavors. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being a part of this webinar.
Thank you once again to TNV Academy for giving me this opportunity to host this webinar. It was nice having interaction with you and share my experience with you all. Hope you're all going to be benefited by this knowledge you gained today. Thank you.